Hello. So, something we get asked about quite a lot, and whether it's POCing or setting up new tools, it's how am I going to handle the actual migration of, the old to the new? How do I convert the concepts? How do I set up testing to make sure the data still looks the same? How do I do the kind of switch over steps? All sorts of bits like that. And obviously, every migration is a massive stress point for kind of any team or org. So today we're going to run through what it could look like to do a full Airflow to Orchestra migration for a bunch of pipelines, just using some skills and Claude, which is my new best friend. So let's jump into what that looks like. First of all, this is my repo. As you can see, it's kind of like a mono repo setup where I have my Airflow DAGs defined in their little Python files. I have four: data quality, an ELT pipeline, some Python that runs together, and a kind of reporting Power BI Slack pipeline. Then also in the repo, you can see my DBT project, some scripts just to help me set up the kind of local instance. Nothing crazy apart from that. But this could be an enormous Airflow project, or it could be a very small one. The main thing is that we've just got like a selection of DAGs to run through today. If we take a look at it in the UI, you can actually see my pipelines do run. They're not completely made up and fake. So we can see that ELT, reporting, and Power BI and chained Python one all run fine. We can actually look and kind of see their most recent runs. Whereas the data quality one currently fails, but that's because it's actually running a data quality test that does fail rather than anything broken about the task. So that could be my current setup. And I'm now at the stage where I want to try out Orchestra for a POC. How quickly can I migrate? Well, let's find out. So in my terminal, I'm just in a repo that contains a whole bunch of skills in here that are kind of ready to be used. And all I'm going to do is enter a little Claude session, and I'm going to make Claude use these skills to help me migrate. So let's just start with the most basic request and see how far we can get just by running that. Now, I'm not expecting this to magically make everything work. With any migration, there's always going to be the aspect of things like credentials, bits of configuration that sit outside the platform and aren't accessible, and all sorts of other kind of clarifying questions that the user is going to need to answer for a migration to happen. But hopefully, these skills and Claude go some way into prompting us when that information is needed, rather than us having to figure it out and go and find where it needs to live. So first of all, it's asked, what is this Airflow instance you want to migrate? So it's actually these four pipelines on a locally running demo. Cool. Also says there looks like there might be some of these in our account. Do we want to add an Airflow suffix just to know? Sure. And that's it. Now I can just let it go and see how far it gets. Now we can see in the background that this is kind of going through a bunch of steps from these skills. Started to look at the DAG sources so that it can map those into Orchestra and make sure it has the right connections, the integrations. It's then going to look at the actual DAG code itself. Then it's going to start looking at the DBT project and some of the specifics around that. And finally, it's going to ask if I want to deploy them to a real Orchestra workspace or if I just want to do the pipeline transformations locally. While that's running, I'll just call out that doing all of this is also possible with our kind of DAG converter tool. So if you wanted to just try out converting your pipelines from an existing platform into Orchestra pipelines, just to kind of run them and see how it goes, then this is a nice, easy way to get set up and have these skills run for you and do a bunch of the kind of heavy lifting without you having to manually check each one. So after a few minutes, we're now part way, and it's asking me about what I would like to do for some of the pipelines. So this says, do you want to use the exact project directory that's specified for that DBT project, or do you want to give it a different one? And in this case, I'm actually going to say, yeah, this is something I'm going to change. So now you can go and look at this DBT project instead. And it's now asking, do I want to actually deploy these as draft Orchestra pipelines? Yes, I do. And we'll let it go and finish that work. Awesome. So that's all finished. We can see that Claude is saying the definitions were pulled from the Airflow REST API. It's gone through them with the skills, looking for things like Fivetran, DBT, SQL, Python, converted them into Orchestra pipelines, deployed them to our demo account. So now it's just a case of us jumping in and checking that they work, which also we could just do with the MCP, but I'm going to go and run them just because it feels nice. So let's trigger each of these pipelines and see what happens. Awesome. And after a couple of minutes, all of these pipelines have run in Orchestra. You can see I have the same 3 successes. So if we were to look at, say, the ELT pipeline, you can see that it successfully ran both 5tran and DBT. If we jump back, we can also see that the data quality DAG failed. And if we jump into that, we can see that again, it did actually fail on a failing test this time, just as it did in Airflow. So already pretty confident that these are consistent. Now, getting it to run in Orchestra obviously has a few more steps that kind of happened in the background. Now, one of the things that the skills would have done or asked me about that you may not have noticed is the connections themselves. So I have things like 5tran and DBT and Power BI or Python already set up as integrations in this account. And when converting pipelines, those skills are going to try and look for the defaults or any existing integrations to see what they can use to actually get the credentials you want. But of course, these may not already exist or be the exact ones that were in Airflow. So do be conscious of that when you're migrating. And on top of that, I may not always want the default ones. And if you're kind of prompting the skills or using them that way, it will give you the option to select different ones or select different kind of parameters for bits like connections. Apart from that, it takes care of all the kind of code migration, the concept changes from like Airflow alerts into Orchestra alerts or the kind of DAG structure itself. And yeah, really made everything pretty smooth and easy. So give it a go. And yeah, I'd love to know kind of what you think and where it kind of got stuck for you, if at all. Cheers.